Welcome to Front Office Pros. I'm Steve and this is Joe. In our last episode, we talked to you about some league losers heading into the playoffs. Well, now we're here to talk to you about some league winners. So, Joe, let's get right into it. Just like last time, we're going to go through 3 players, but this time we're going to be talking about league winners. So, our first is quarterback Mike White. He is going up against Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, as once again, as crazy as it might sound, and as risky as it could be, and as much as people might not like it, I mean, it's hard not to like Mike White going forward. I mean, he's got these 3 matchups are pretty good. I mean, Detroit could be a little stingy, sure, but at the same time, they score points on offense, so a lot of these times, these games for them become shootouts, and you definitely want a piece of those type of games. So yeah, I think if you're somebody like we mentioned, with Justin Fields or Tua, Mike White could be a great pivot option for you.
Yeah, I mean, Mike White's got some juicy matchups, and what I like about it is, to me, it's not. I guess in my mind, we're not going with the trendy pick just for the sake of going with the trendy pick. Like the stats support it. Like he threw, I think for what did he throw for like over 300 yards again against Minnesota? I mean, he's they're throwing the ball, they're slinging the ball around New York, and as you can see, Garrett Wilson has been a huge beneficiary. Even Corey Davis had a great week, in coming back. So I mean, to me, it seems crazy to think that you would start Mike White instead of Tua, but it's like that's the contrast of going with your emotion and going with the players that you've been going with all the time versus on paper, Mike White's got the better matchup.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not like Mike White hasn't performed for fantasy, and shown the ability. I mean, I believe against the Vikings, like you mentioned, I believe he threw for 375 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And it was close, but he got in there for the quarterback sneak rushing touchdown as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
The one question about him is whether or not will Zach Wilson end up becoming the starter again. You and I are pretty convinced he won't, but Robert Saleh keeps talking about it as though that the door is open.
That is my one concern. I feel like it'd be a hard sell in that locker room for them to go back to Zach Wilson at this point after it seems like Mike White has that locker room and people, rally around him. But then to pivot to Wilson, I think it'd be tough. But as you mentioned, Saleh keeps bringing it up, so we'll see.
Yeah, so our next quarterback, which is a potential league winner, and it's crazy I'm saying this, but Brock Purdy, quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, he's going up against Seattle, Washington, and the Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, he looked pretty good coming in for Jimmy G in that game. Mr. Irrelevant turns out to not be so irrelevant after all. He looked
You got
decent.
all the puns coming out, Joe.
he's got the weapons. Got the run game with McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, and Kittle to throw to. I with those matchups, I actually think he could perform.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this, before the show, and you were more convinced than I was with Purdy, but it's hard to refute the stats. I mean, he was, threw 37 times, 25 completions, ended up having 210 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. So, I mean, not like unbelievable numbers, but for his first game getting thrown in like that was pretty impressive. And the reason why I like it is because of the matchups. It's hard to deny how juicy those matchups are. If he was playing, some of these like really good defenses, I would tell you like don't even consider this guy. But it's I feel stronger about Mike White, but I can understand the possibility that Purdy could be a league winner for you.
Yeah, and then the thing about Purdy versus Mike White might already be gone in some of your leagues, but there's a chance that especially whoever the Jimmy G owner is, they get Purdy's out there and they could be looking to pick him up.
Unless you're in a deep dynasty league, no one had Purdy on their roster.
Exactly. We're in a pretty deep dynasty league, and he just got picked up today. So
yeah, exactly. So he's Mr. Irrelevant for a reason. How many 7th round picks even make it to somebody's roster? So yeah, so the last league winner we've got His quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, he's been a pretty big disappointment this year, but he's going up against the Rams, he's going up against the Dolphins, and then the Minnesota Vikings.
You definitely like those matchups, especially the Minnesota Vikings one. I like those games. Always, with the Vikings offense on the other side, much like when you play the Lions, those games tend to become a shootout, and you just want players in those games.
Yeah, the one thing I've talked to you about is, they've had conversations. I think, Brian Gutekunst came out and said, it was asked whether or not Jordan Love could possibly see some snaps, which honestly is a fair question. They drafted him in the first round. We've seen him play very, very little. Coming up, they're going to have to decide whether they're going to pick up the 50-year option. And, every time LaFleur comes out, he says adamantly, Rodgers is our quarterback. So that'll be interesting. I think it's going to be, Rodgers is a competitor. I mean, he's going to want to keep playing. You saw, with that ribs injury, he's like, oh, no, I'm playing. So I think he'll be fine. But he's a guy who we thought would be good to mention because you definitely weren't start. I mean, if you're in the playoffs, you definitely weren't starting him week to week, but he's probably on your bench. And I think you should give strong consideration playing him.
Yeah, definitely. And, he said as long as they're mathematically in the playoff hunt, he's playing. So maybe if, depending on what happens in the last few games here, if they get eliminated, it could be Jordan Love. So, I mean, he might be a guy that you might just want to throw on your roster, just in case. And with those matchups, we saw him get thrown in. He threw that touchdown pass to Christian Watson. So he could do some things with those matchups. We'll see how he progresses.
Yeah, he would be a really good stash. And you just never know. I mean, look, Lamar Jackson, he's going to be out now for a few weeks. Jimmy G looks like he's definitely out for fantasy purposes, but could be for the rest of the year, including the postseason. So you just never know what quarterback could possibly get injured. So that's not a position that you want to be left being like, I have no options.
Yeah, 100%. That's why, we're giving you some names that you could potentially pick up, stash, and pivot to.
Yeah, so transitioning over to the running back show, our first league winner is Zonovan Knight, otherwise known as, I believe, Bam is his nickname, and for the New York Jets. And he's going up against Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle.
Knight was pretty impressive with the Vikings. My one concern with Knight would be to see that game was without Michael Carter. And I kind of want to see Michael Carter could possibly be back this week. If he is back, I'm really curious to see how that impacts Knight. But I at least would think I think Carter could be more used in the passing game, and Knight gets most of the rushing. But with those matchups, I think he still should be a good play down the stretch.
Yeah, but Saleh did mention recently that he has secured himself a spot in the rotation. Like you said, he may not be getting as many carries as he was, but I mean, he's had these past 2 games. He's definitely been relevant. So he's definitely a guy. Those matchups are really nice. So whether you have Michael Carter on your team, probably Zonovan Knight has already been picked up, but hopefully you have him on your bench, and you might be able to consider him if you have, like in our last video, if we talked about James Conner, if he's got a really bad match, one of his worst matchups, you might want to consider pivoting.
Yeah, definitely. And with Zonovan too, I mean, he definitely has that big playability. He had a big run against Minnesota. So all it really takes is a big run for him and get in the end zone, and he'll be a solid play.
Yeah, so the next player we just talked about recently in one of our other videos, how he's not a complete bust anymore, but running back Cam Akers, Rams, he's going up against the Packers, the Denver Broncos, and then the LA Chargers.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he does, against the Raiders this week. But if he continues to play like he just showed he could last week against the Seahawks, he easily could be a league winner for you. I mean, it's a guy that most likely, you've kind of just had on your bench and waiting. Somebody probably could have given up on him, so he could even be out there. Who knows? But with those matchups, and Broncos could be tough, but with the exception of that, he's got some matchups to exploit there and can definitely help you out.
Yeah, heading into pre-draft this year, I think he was kind of a hot name. People really, liked what he could possibly do this year. And in dynasty leagues, I feel like he was, always, pretty highly regarded. And when it comes to Cam Akers, he's relevant again. It'll be interesting with Baker Mayfield coming in at quarterback now. Does that even allow for less pressure on that team? Because right now it's been Wolford and Perkins, and he had his best game of the season last week. So I think he's. I don't necessarily like the Denver matchup, but those other two matchups are really good. But Denver, we have seen, the Carolina Panthers ran all over them, and Josh Jacobs had success. So not to say he couldn't have success against Denver.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I mean, Josh Jacobs in 2 games, I mean, just absolutely torched the Broncos. And then, Panthers ran it 46 times for over 200 yards against them. So it definitely, on paper, they're probably, number one in probably a lot of the leagues against your running backs there. But yeah, I mean, it's not the best, but he could make it out of there, I think.
So our last league winner for the running back position is Isiah Pacheco for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he has Houston. He's got Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, that first matchup, it's hard to get any better than the Houston Texans. They are the worst against the run. And then, it's good too, because if the Chiefs get ahead, they're just going to be running the ball, and most likely it'll be to Isiah Pacheco, and he's like really good. Increased workload the last couple of weeks, including 15 carries last week against the Bengals. So with those matchups, I think he's a great option to throw in there.
Yeah, I'm honestly really surprised that he has gotten the amount of carries that he has. I think with Clyde getting injured and out of the way, that's been huge for him. Really has allowed him to kind of be the person to get the bulk of the carries. Obviously, McKinnon's still involved, but really like Pacheco, especially against Houston. I think he's a great pivot option for you during the stretch of the playoffs. So transitioning over to the wide receivers now, our next player here, who is a league winner, could be a league winner, I should say, is wide receiver Christian Watson, Green Bay Packers. He's obviously been in a touchdown. He's been a touchdown machine, I should say. And he's got the Rams, Miami Dolphins, and the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Watson, 8 touchdowns in 4 games. It's crazy. For a guy that got a lot of criticism because in his first ever opportunity, he absolutely dropped a dime from Rodgers that would have been a 75-yard touchdown to kick off his career. And man, I'd be interested to see how that first half of the season goes if he just catches that ball. But given the ebbs and flows, he's coming on here, and his 4.3 speed is real with that size. You see him continually these weeks just running away from people. So with those matchups, he's definitely can be exploited and should be in your lineups come playoff time.
Man, it's definitely vindication for those of you who, drafted Christian Watson. I think in redraft leagues, maybe he wasn't or possibly dropped. But in dynasty leagues, especially ours, the owner who drafted Christian Watson, I mean, it's vindication because, wasn't believing in the guy. Rodgers notoriously, didn't really hit it off with rookie receivers. But, him and Dobbs obviously have done really well for themselves. And to me, I would say that Watson's got to be a must start these next 3 weeks. I mean, obviously you've got your elite receivers like, the Diggs, the Tyreek Hills, Devontae Adams. You're not benching those guys. But Watson, if you have Watson, he needs to be in your lineup regardless of league setting.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, he's definitely a must start, especially for the playoff stretch.
Yeah, so our next player who could be a league winner is wide receiver Garrett Wilson, another rookie, and he's got the Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Seattle Seahawks. We picked a lot of Jets here, Joe.
Yeah, for good reason, man. Even we talked about Garrett Wilson. I'd probably toss in Corey Davis and take a flyer on him as well. I mean, he had 10 targets in his first game back, and given the juicy matchups, the Jets are just with Mike White, the offense is completely changed, and get your Jets players in there and exploit these matchups.
Yeah, he's another one to me that he is a must start. These matchups are really good. Detroit's a little bit more stingy than people will say, but I really like what he's been able to do, and I think he has the potential to be a league winner for you. Now, if Zach Wilson were to come in, it makes me a little bit more concerned, but those matchups are so good. I still feel like you got to start him.
Yeah, that'd be a tough decision because we saw the production go down for Garrett Wilson when it was, away from Joe Flacco to Zach Wilson, and then now we're seeing it go up with Mike White in there. So be a tough call, but it'd be tough not to ride him out at least for that first week potentially. And then if Zach Wilson is still not working out, then you might have to pivot from there.
Yeah, so our other possible league winner for wide receivers is wide receiver Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys. He's the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, Gallup since coming back from the injury, they slowly worked him in at first, but now he's really catching on. A couple touchdowns this past week against the Colts, and they seem to be targeting him and utilizing him, and we'll see what happens with Beckham. But if the reports ring true that they're not happy with that physical and stuff, and they don't end up bringing him in, Gallup for your playoff stretch is going to be nice.
Well, even if he is brought in at this point, I don't think Odell is going to be that much of a factor. He's more of a playoff run player. He's not really, I think, in contention as far as fantasy is concerned. Don't you agree?
Yeah. Now, I mean, at first when Beckham's name was first brought up, and kind of I was nervous being that I have Gallup in the league, but especially like you're saying, more so utilized in the playoff, not your fantasy playoffs. It makes me feel a little bit better about Gallup and the potential of Beckham not being involved there.
Yeah, and I think Gallup is really starting to get back to his old form. I think it took a little bit while. It just really wasn't right, but now we're starting to see it. And Dak does look his way, and I think those are some really good matchups for him. Definitely, Titans can be exploitable. So can be the Jaguars. Philly's a tough matchup, but that's going to be a dogfight of a game, and they're going to be going back and forth. So he's going to have to rely. On Dak's gonna have to rely on his weapons, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we saw, Treylon Burks being able to get that long touchdown against the Eagles. So we'll see. I mean, that's kind of Gallup's targets have been a lot down the field. We'll see if he can't get behind that tough Phillies defense and score some points.
Well, and losing Gardner Johnson, I don't know if he'll be back, but that was a big loss. He was having a career year in that defense. Of course, when I trade for him in our dynasty league, all of a sudden now he has a last trade kidney, but so be it. So transitioning over to the tight end group, Joe, our league winners, would you imagine another Jet here, Joe? Tyler Conklin going up. He's got Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, this guy's had an up and down season, but I feel like 7 targets last week against the Vikings from Mike White makes me feel a little bit better, especially with how bad the tight ends have been. I think he's worth a flyer given the matchup set, and maybe he, if he gets the end zone for you, then he's going to be one of the top tight ends in the week most likely.
Yeah, depending on your matchups for your tight ends, and because of how bad it is, he's a guy that I'd like to have in the stable just in case, and I might consider starting him. He's not my favorite of the 3 league winners we're going to be talking about, but I could definitely see him being relevant here in this playoff stretch.
So yeah, absolutely. He's definitely not my favorite either, but he definitely could be relevant.
Yeah, so the next guy we got is your man, tight end Greg Dulcich of the Denver Broncos. And he's going up against the Arizona Cardinals, the LA Rams, and the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, as I keep saying, man, sign me up for anyone against the Cardinals and Seahawks, and what a great way to kick off the playoff week for him against the Cardinals. The only thing you got to worry about is, man, how bad Russell Wilson has been, and hope that he can just get him the ball. But with Sutton nursing the hamstring, I like Dulcich even more. Like you heard Hackett already say, they're kind of using him in a wide receiver role, which is if you're a Dulcich owner, it's music to your ears, and he's got the great playoff matchups and should be a strong play.
Yeah, it never made much sense. When he first was activated, he got involved early and often. And, you got to see Denver Broncos fans and, league got to see, what made them select him because he's a great receiving threat for a tight end. All of a sudden, then he kind of fell off the radar for whatever reason. But like you said, with the Sutton injury, and who knows, I mean, Broncos don't have really anything to play for. So they're not going to necessarily be rushing Cortland Sutton back. So I think in this tight end landscape, Greg Dulcich is a really good option for you for the playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. And, with your speculation there of what's going on with the Broncos, they seem to just take whatever worked well and just toss that to the side and completely try to do anything else. That's generally been the theme. Like, Jalen Virgil, one play, big touchdown. Where has he been ever since? Just befuddling what they're doing there.
Yeah, so our last player who could be a league winner for you is tight end Gerald Everett of the LA Chargers. Did a great year this year. And he's going up against the Tennessee Titans, the Indianapolis Colts, and the LA Rams, his former team.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. A little bit of rivalry game for your championship. We saw, AJ Brown absolutely torch the Titans. See what could potentially happen there. But yeah, I like Gerald Everett. It's more so the one frustrating thing with him is I feel like the Chargers could use him more, but for whatever reason they don't seem to. Really just, Herbert just hasn't really targeted him that much. He just goes to Eckler, but he does have the potential for big games. And then, he usually gets 4 or 5 catches a game. So he's a pretty safe floor. And then if he gets a touchdown, he's going to have a good ceiling game for you.
And honestly, I like him all the more if Mike Williams continues to stay out. I don't know what his prognosis is as far as his injury and when he's going to come back, but he's just another mouth to feed in that offense. There was at one point when both Allen and Williams were out. That was when Everett, I think, kind of rose to the top. But I like the revenge game against the Rams. I just thought about that. And, sometimes the revenge narrative, you saw what A.J. Brown did, then you also saw what Deshaun Watson did. So you never know, I guess.
Yeah, well, that is true. I mean, I don't know. Watson had a lot of more negative emotion to that and whatnot. And he hadn't played in a while. I think that had a lot to do with it. But definitely, if Everett's got to have a revenge game to get some added motivation in there and for them to feed him the ball more, I'm all for it.
Well, and I have to think for those players, they circle when they're going up against their former team. They're circling that game on the schedule, and they want to show out for that game. I'd have to imagine.
100%. I mean, A.J. Brown had that game circled on his calendar when he's going to play against the Titans, and I'm sure Melvin Gordon's got this game circled on his calendar for the Broncos this week.
Is he gonna play?
We'll see if he gets called up and plays. It'll be interesting.
That would be, if they did that, man, that would just be like mocking the division rival, which who knows, maybe they would do that. I don't know. So that was our league winners for the playoff stretch. We thought it'd be a good idea to be able to do some league winners and some league losers. If you haven't watched it yet, you can go ahead and check it out. We just did our last video on league losers. But you can support our channel by liking this video, going ahead and subscribing to our channel, and hitting the notification bell. And go ahead and put some comments below. Do you have some players that you're wondering whether or not they're league winners? And we'll be here for you during the playoff stretch. If you have questions on who you should play and who you shouldn't play, we're happy to give you our advice. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time.